the At the Pylon podcast. Today's preview episode centers around the Pats versus Saints matchup upcoming at you this Sunday. My name is Nick Antonakas, and I am lucky enough to be joined by our co-host, Chandler Betts. What's up, Chandler?
Yeah, this is more like a general hospital podcast than a football podcast at this point.
You can say that again because, wow, the Pats have so many injuries that we've encountered over this past week. We're going to dive into those brutal injuries the Pats had faced against the Cowboys last week. But a little bit of a curveball threw at us earlier in the week. A big trade, a familiar face coming back to New England in the form of J.C. Jackson. We'll talk all about it. And at the end of the episode, obviously, we'll take a deeper dive into the New Orleans Saints, take a look at their matchup against the Pats upcoming this Sunday. So let's start off with the big news of the week, Chandler. J.C. Jackson is on his way back to New England. It's funny because just a couple weeks ago, I was bringing up the point when he was a healthy scratch in his game for the Chargers. I was saying, man, everybody's saying right now that he should have stayed in New England's system because that's where he really thrived. And look where he is. He's back in New England's system. Patriots trade for J.C. Jackson and a 2025 7th-round pick from the L.A. Chargers for a 2025 6th-round pick. So why don't we just start with your overall thoughts on the trade, Chandler? Personally, I thought it was relatively a fleece on New England's part.
Yeah, I found it really interesting that they continued to healthy scratch him, especially after giving him such a large contract. And I think that's really the key of why this is a fleece, because as we've seen, they are paying most of the contract. I believe that we're only paying around $1 million, $1.5 million, I think, somewhere in that range. And his contract goes for a couple years. We have him tied down at that really nice rate for the foreseeable future. And it's really just a trade of necessity. He now joins the list of people, Trey Flowers, Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins twice. Or is it Kyle Van Noy?
Three times.
3 times, yeah.
Collins came back 3 times.
Yeah, to leave the Patriots and then come back. If we really want to go retro, I believe Deion Branch did it as well after he went to the Seahawks way back. But more recently, this is a trend player, does really well for the Patriots, gets a lot of money, stinks, comes back, and often they play well again. I don't know if we'll see that because of how different of a player he's been. He's been really poor for them, so much so, of course, getting, I believe it was a top 5 average value cornerback contract at the time to then being a healthy scratch just a year later. I don't think there's really any risk here because the difference between a 6 and a 7, especially with a better team in the Chargers, and we're probably going to be closer to the top of that draft. So I don't think it's a huge disparity there. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good trade.
Yeah, and you were talking, Chandler, about the cap hit for New England. They made out fabulously with the J.C. Jackson contract that he was currently under with the L.A. Chargers. A quote from Mike Reese's breaking news article that broke the news to all of us about this Jackson trade said, quote, that New England will be, quote, covering around $1.5 million, and the Chargers are covering the rest in a sign-out bonus, sources told ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. Jackson's contract, which runs through the 2026 season, stays intact otherwise, the sources said. So, obviously, money-wise, it's great because New England didn't want to pay the money for J.C. Jackson originally. But bringing him back on a much cheaper deal like we've seen here could definitely benefit New England in a time of need at their cornerback position. I was watching Faria earlier this week. He was saying that apparently after this year, nothing is guaranteed on J.C. Jackson's contract. There's no guaranteed money whatsoever. So apparently that's going to be a chokehold that the Pats are going to hold over him in the years to come. So while next year and the years after the salary is pretty high, they can obviously rework it to their standard because none of it is guaranteed. The guy could be cut for free, basically. So other than the cap questions and the draft picks that New England gave up and received, I guess, for J.C. Jackson, it seems like a great trade on paper. But the big question surrounding him is he the same player? He obviously had that meniscus injury last year, which took him out in week 7. Since then, and even in his tenure beforehand, he wasn't that great, as you were saying. But do you think that the New England defensive system can kind of allow him to flourish again?
I think that there's really no way to tell until he's on the field. He's such a unique player, having been an undrafted free agent out of Maryland. That was such a big one of the key Belichick things you see every once in a while. Your undrafted player, your seventh rounder, your surprise players that have no reason to be as good or to either to have fallen or simply don't appear to have the talent when they come into New England, and then they figure it out and they become Mr. Interception. Internet has had a field day the past couple of days saying Mac Jones is no longer Mr. Interception because JC's back.
Oh,
That got a big pop out of me. That was a very good one. But as for whether he'll be the same player, I don't think we can really know until he steps on the field, just because it's such a different system. We've seen how poor that defense, that Chargers defense in general, has been, especially last year, blowing a large lead. I don't remember the exact number. I want to say it was 27 to the Jaguars in the playoffs. But
yeah.
yeah, of course that was without him. But
I thought it
regardless,
was
that
24, but it was
defense,
somewhere around there.
24, something around there. Too many points for them to have
Yeah.
lost. But I don't know if we'll see him be the same player. I think he'll have a bit of a resurgence. I think generally the New England defensive scheme is lends itself to a player like him. But I actually pulled up the exact contract in front of me on Spotrac. We do have a complete out next year. But if we don't take that out, which I'm looking at it looks like we're going to have to, because that's going to be a $14.5 million cap hit next year.
Yeah, no, thank
it's
you.
more likely that we cut and then restructure.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Do you
We'll
think
see.
do you think he's fully healthy, Chandler? Because last week he was saying when he originally got the first healthy scratch, he was like, I'm confused by this decision, but I'm not 100% healthy.
Again, I'm not in the facility. I don't really have a way to know. I think a lot will become evident based on how often Bill plays him. If he plays him
Yeah.
this week, if he lines him up against a Michael Thomas, I guess we'll have to see like that.
And I honestly, I hope that he plays this week because our
Yes.
cornerback room has been cut extremely thin after last Sunday. Just going over some of the injuries that the New England Patriots have faced since their Dallas Cowboys game alone. We heard earlier this week after Christian Gonzalez went down with a shoulder injury in the first quarter of the Cowboys game. He actually has a labrum tear. The poor guy. He was having such a great season, but he's done for the year. What a promising prospect he is, and hopefully he comes back full strength next year. But for now, he's out. Another superstar on the Patriots defense, Matthew Judon, lower right bicep tear. He's undergoing surgery today. Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah, so yesterday was Wednesday. Today is Thursday. I need to learn my days of the week apparently. But he is out for the season as well. Although Judon was saying at points, he's like, I'm hoping to come back this year. It's not going to happen. But
yeah, nor should he.
yeah. And on top of those injuries, there's guys like Jonathan Jones who are still out. Jack Jones is on IR. Marcus Jones is out for the season. Our defense has taken a huge blow, yet is still probably the strength of our team. How do you think JC is going to be able to slot in for a guy like Gonzo? I don't think it's an upgrade of any sorts. Of course, it's a downgrade, but considering our troops beforehand, I think JC Jackson is an upgrade over Miles Bryant at cornerback one, even though I like Miles Bryant. But
agreed. Miles Bryant has been pretty decent this year, but the first thing that should happen when JC Jackson walks into the locker room is to demand that he gets the number 27 back. He doesn't really have a choice other than to slot in as our cornerback one on an island to try to 10 versus 10 the other team. Where it's going to be really interesting to see how Gerard Mayo is going to call this defense from this point on. And if this defense looks at all okay, at all decent, I expect him to be at least in contention for head coaching interviews this offseason, because this defense has lost the team's best player in Judon, probably right now the team's second best player in Gonzo, probably the team's third best player in Marcus Jones, and then just more depth on top of that. So much so that we're suffering with former practice squad players as our cornerback too. Shout out Sean Wade.
yeah, you were talking.
Really interesting, yeah.
You were talking. Mayo actually said earlier this week a great coach, by the way, who I'm
Yes.
excited to see what he does when it comes time for altering this Patriots defense. He was saying that multiple players are going to be called upon based on the week's game plan. That's what he was kind of saying in his press conference earlier this week. One of the guys he mentioned was second round pick Keon White. He said,
Yes.
quote, "We really need him to show up." So obviously Judon goes down. We've seen bits and pieces of Keon White throughout the regular season, obviously a lot from him in the preseason. How do you think he's going to slot in for Judon? And could he be the next superstar outbreak for the New England Patriots defense?
I definitely think he could be. We were talking throughout the course of the week how while Judon is absolutely unequivocally our best player, he's also at the strongest position of depth for our team right now. If we look at our pass rush right now, we still have Uche and we still have Keon White. This is a group that can still get after the quarterback, Barmore in the middle, Dedrick Wise as well. We have talent on this defensive line. And I think that Keon White definitely has all the tools and, as we've seen so far, the production to be able to fill that role about as adequately as someone could.
And I think you're definitely right. The scary part for me, at least, when both of these guys went down last week, I was like not as concerned with the Judon injury. Of course, like you said, he's our best player, but I think he's been a little bit cold to start the season. I wasn't super keen on his performance. Obviously, the guy's a superstar, so he's going to draw bodies no matter how well he's playing at the time. But when Christian Gonzalez went down, our cornerback room was totally depleted. So although there's depth at the pass rusher position, like we've said, I'm not super worried about that. And I also agree with you. I think Keon White will be able to step up and fulfill that role. It's really just the cornerbacks that we're going to have to kind of assess and pray that they they show up to the plate. But I think it's a good point to kind of shift gears. We've talked a lot about the defense, but going into our offensive game plan this week against the Saints, Mac Jones was the big conversation of last week. Everybody was kind of hopping off the Mac Jones ship. Personally, being a supporter of Mac as long as he's been in the NFL, I wasn't ready to hop off the boat completely and give up on the guy, and I thought that everybody who was doing so was kind of jumping the gun at least, but he did not have a good week last week at all. And you and I were talking about how there's clearly a disconnect between the coaching staff and Mac Jones. Obviously, post game on Sunday, it seemed that that disconnect was still existing. But as the week went on, we started to get an idea that the coaching staff is finally admitting that they are behind Mac. I have this quote here from Bill O'Brien. He said, quote, "Mac is a battler. He is a competitor. When you play quarterback in this league, you have to limit the mistakes and you have to limit the bad games you have, obviously. We're all in it together. We have to do a better job of coaching up some things with him. He has to do a better job of making good decisions with us. He knows that. He takes a lot of ownership. You guys saw that, I think, after the game. He blames himself. The game wasn't lost because of one guy. The game was lost on our part because of how poorly we played and coached in the game. Mac is here today. He's working very hard to get back on the right track. We have a lot of belief in Mac." So while the Patriots are expressing their belief in Mac, do you have hope he can turn it around, Chandler, this week against the Saints?
This is going to be a tough week to do it. The Saints defense is very strong. Over the past 12 games, in 11 of them, they've allowed 20 or fewer points. This past week being the only exception when they let up 28, 26 to the Bucs.
Yep.
It's a very strong defense. It's a very deep defense. I think that this is going to be a very low scoring game. I think this is probably a good time to display some of the stats that I've found over the past week.
Let's hear it.
Plays inside the red zone this year. All teams in the NFL, red zone, of course, being 20-yard line and in. Average amount for each team is 35 and a half. The Cowboys are at first. You want to guess how many they have?
How many?
Take a guess.
Red zone attempts?
Plays that happen inside the red zone.
Okay.
The average is 38 and a half.
And the Cowboys are in first, that meaning the most.
Yes.
Let's say 48.
85.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. What is wrong with me with my guessing here? I was going a little bit too low and considering third. Well, actually, 35 is the average.
Yes, so 38 and
Okay,
a
so I
half
guess that wasn't
average.
that bad of a
No,
guess.
you were not that bad because it's absurd.
Okay.
And second place has 54. I don't remember who's in second place. I want to say it's the 49ers. Uh, Saints are 19th in the league at 35. Where do you think the Patriots are?
Last.
31st at 19. The only team that we're ahead of is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who only have 18 plays inside the red zone this year.
Wow.
I have two more stats, actually.
Pull them out.
Third down percentage inside of the 35-yard line considered field goal range. Third down percentage. League average is 37%. The top is the Ravens at 71%. That's very high. Fourth is the Saints at 48%. Patriots,
Wow.
again, 31st at 18%, only ahead of the Steelers, again, who are at 10%.
Jesus. My
And this
God.
is the one that put me on this journey to find all of these stats. Percentage of drives ending in punt or turnover. The
Oh
best,
God.
of course, the best being the lowest, the 49ers at 29% of drives ending in punt or turnover. The league average, 53%. That's actually not good. Like
Yeah, no.
defenses are doing well right now. This is a defensive performance in the first couple of weeks of the season. Saints, 23rd in the league at 61%. I know the Patriots have been 31st in the past two stats, dead last in this one. 71% of drives ending in punt or turnover. The next closest is 67%. That's a 4% swing. That's a horrible offense. This offense has been so anemic that we can't even end more than 30% of our drives in points. It's just so bad.
And you know what I think a huge factor in that is, Chandler? Because for the first time this year, our red zone efficiency has been great. We
Yes.
actually, when we get in the red zone, we finally turned it around from last year, which
What?
was an abysmal performance in the red zone last year. We're actually scoring in the red zone. But that stat just highlights how much of a challenge it's been for our team to just get there. It's like we flipped from last year. Last year, we could work our way down the field, but we could never finish. This year, when we have the opportunity to finish, we can pull it off, but we can't even get there in the first place. Third down conversions. That just, as soon as you said that stat, I was like, well, poof.
Yeah.
There's the green light, I guess, the blinking green light, because constant drives for New England ending in field goal after field goal after field goal. And that's why they only have 55 points of offense so far this year. It's not been a great performance.
Third to last in the league.
But tying into Mac Jones, I don't think that, I mean, last week, of course, it was those turnovers were his fault, and part of not getting down into the red zone was his fault. But I think our main Achilles heel in this is just how non-present the run game has been because of the offensive line. Going against the Saints this week, I was watching a lot of the Bucks versus Saints game last week. And you could credit this to the Bucks O-line, of course, but the Saints pass rush was practically not apparent at all.
Yeah.
Their pass rush was struggling. And for a good defense that they are, at least on paper, they had like no presence against the Baker Mayfield led Bucks, who have been good this year, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
But like,
because of that defense, yeah.
yeah. But they just didn't have it. So maybe if we're pitching a week for Mac to get back into it,
Yes.
I would say that there's a chance that this defense is the easiest defense that we've faced so far this season, which is saying a lot because we have faced a lot of good defenses, and the Saints also have a very good defense. Would you agree with that? That maybe we're the Saints might be the low ball player in that regard?
Um, that's tough. I'm not sure.
Well, let
I
me
think that
rephrase. Let me rephrase. At least in the categories of where we've been struggling, it seems that
sure.
our struggles are centered around pressure on Mac, the offensive line collapsing, and the running game not getting a product because of the offensive line struggles. The Saints are faced with a team that have shown signs of not being able to rush the passer or stop the run. So,
I think
although their
that
cornerbacks are
yeah,
stacked,
it's true. I think that even if we do say that they're the worst defense we've faced, that doesn't really mean anything because they're still probably a top 12 defense in the league, I would say. Just based on their raw defensive stats. They let up 15 points to the Titans, 17 to the Panthers, 18 to the Packers, and 26 to the Bucks. I talked about the fact that they hadn't let up 20 or more points in 11 consecutive games for this past weekend. We shouldn't really be talking about their defense as a weak defense, even if they had a weak performance against the Bucks last week.
I wouldn't say it's a weak defense, but probably the weakest we've faced.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree.
And you could say, of course, that the Cowboys are second to last. I mean, in competition with the Jets. But last week we were completely shut out by the Cowboys. We only had 3 points. So it's just a matter of being able to. Well, actually, let me rephrase that statement again, because Micah Parsons apparently was. I saw this stat earlier this week that he was putting, like, Mac was the number one pressured QB in the league last year because of Micah Parsons. Like, I think he had 10 pressures alone.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Oh, Micah Parsons is leading the league, tied with Aiden Hutchinson and Myles Garrett or TJ Watt, one of those two in pressures, I think, at 40, which is crazy stats.
And while the Patriots obviously, and we're both hoping that this is the week that they can finally get back on track after last week's abysmal performance, it's not going to be super easy to do against the Saints defense, regardless of if they're the easiest that they faced all season. Turning to the Saints offense, on the other hand, there are some red flags popping up there. Derek Carr went down with an injury against the Bucks.
Yes.
Shoulder injury on his throwing arm.
Yep, AC
it's
joint.
up in the air if he's even going to play this week. What does that mean for New England if he ends up sitting out this contest?
Well, I think that he will play. I was doing a little research. All signs are saying that he has continued to be throwing throughout the course of the week, that he will play. But if he doesn't play, you know who that means is in? Jameis Winston. And then if Jameis Winston goes down, you know who's in, Nick?
Taysom
Jake
Hill.
Luton.
Luton is back?
He's their third quarterback. It
would
probably
my God.
Realistically, it would probably be Taysom Hill, but he is number 3 on their depth chart. So,
wow, that's throwback to our nosebleeds days.
Yes, absolute weapon in that first drive for the Jaguars. My God. But this Saints offense is bad. If we look at just the raw numbers being how many points you're averaging, the Patriots are 30th in the league at 13.8 points a game. The Saints are only one above. It's technically tied for 25th, but it's 15.5. This is going to be two very similar offenses with questionable play calling. The Saints have had very questionable play calling throughout the course of the year. Little yard production and a big reliance on field position. I think that this is not going to be a game for a neutral to watch. If any of you have friends that you're trying to get into football, don't tell them to watch this game. This game might stink. I'll be watching it, of course, but this game might be horrible.
And I think a key point to kind of close on before we move to our keys, Chandler, is the Saints have not scored over 20 points this year. Their only 20-point performance was against the Carolina Panthers, who are among the league's worst this year. So obviously, if there's any game that New England could be tossed a bone in terms to get back into it with their tough schedule this year, this is the week to do it. They got to hope to turn things around as soon as possible. But let's move into our keys. Chandler, what are your 3 keys for New England getting the W this week?
All right. My first key, as we've established based on how poor their offense is, and frankly, how poor our offense has been, we have to score early. It doesn't necessarily have to be first, but I think we have to come out of the first quarter with a lead. Because if we can do that, even if it's a 7-3 lead, I think that's a big deal for us. Even if it's a 3-0 lead, a 6-3 lead, if we can come out of that quarter with more points, that's huge for the momentum, especially for the play calling for the rest of the game. Number 2, based on the stats that I've given, please don't punt the ball. Please don't punt the ball. We need to have drives. Just coming out with 3, I'm not asking for that much. I just want you guys to be able to get 30 to 40 yards in a drive and then end with a field goal. That's not that much to ask. Last one, I've established I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game. The over-under is 40. I might hammer that under. No penalties. That's the way that is going to cause the biggest field position switch, that and effective punting from both sides. Just don't shoot yourself in the foot, Mike Onwenu. Please don't. Please don't.
And
Those are
I
my
think,
three.
yeah, Chandler, a key piece before I read mine, a key piece between my keys and yours are that they're complete opposites of what happened last week. So let's dive into my keys. You talked about penalties. My first key, no turnovers. Burnt us really bad last week. Really bad. 2 of the 3 turnovers that Mac had, including his 2 interceptions and the 1 fumble, 2 of those 3 were turned back for touchdowns by Dallas. 14 points putting you in the hole off turnovers alone is ridiculous. We cannot allow that to happen again. You got to take care of the ball, especially Mac. I'm looking at you. You did horrible at that last week. You got to turn it around. Second off, contain Alvin Kamara. The guy came back from a 3-game suspension to start the year. Last week was his first week. Didn't show any signs of rust in my book. The guy was he had 13 receptions, only for 33 yards. Like you were saying, their yards per play, I guess, has been lacking so far this year, but 13 receptions is still something to applaud at. He went 11. Yep, he went 11 for 51 in the run game. He's dynamic, versatile, and like I said, he hasn't really shown any signs of rust this year. So, in a Patriots defense that's very centric in locking out your star, they're still going to try to go to him a ton this week. So, being able to shut down Kamara would be a huge for the New England Patriots. But finally, my last key is to force 3rd and long. Like I said, the Saints are going to be going to Alvin Kamara a lot this game, whether it's off a short pass or a screen pass or just a run play in general. If you limit the Saints to 3rd and long, and we saw this a lot last week against the Bucs, they were faced with a ton of 3rd and long scenarios, and because of that, they only put up 6 points. So if we can push the Saints to 3rd and long enough, we're going to be able to take them off the field a good amount and get our offense on the field to hopefully get some points. But with that, Chandler, the moment everybody's been waiting for, score and prediction. Hit me.
All right. Throughout the course of this year, the Saints have needed 3 Ryan Tannehill interceptions to beat them. They needed Bryce Young and an 0-4 Panthers to beat them.
I just saw your updated score. Oh my God.
They blew a 17-point lead to lose to the Jordan Love led Packers, and they had a disappointing 26-9 loss against the Bucs last week. This is going to be quite the if any of you are familiar with Iowa Hawkeyes football, this is going to be a very similar game to those kinds of games. They are very bad at offense. Don't watch Iowa football if you don't like punting and defensive touchdowns. My score prediction for the game is 16-14, and I think Patriots are going to win.
I like the pick, Chandler. I like the pick. Last week, I will preface before I say my score decision. I said I was out on New England's after their terrible performance against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm still on that ship. I would not be slamming my bets anymore on New England in the AFC Championship. That for me is out. Playoffs, I think, are probably looking more and more out as the weeks go on. I mean, is there a slim chance I think we can still get in? Yes. But as the weeks go on, it's getting slimmer and slimmer. So in that hope, you could say I'm out. Regardless, based off this week's circumstances, based off the feeling in the locker room that I was just hating on so much last week, I have a final score of 21-13, low scoring game, but I have New England's getting the win.
Let's go.
I think if we score 3 touchdowns in this, I'd love for them to be 3 passing touchdowns from Mac because boy, does he need a bounce back game. But if they're running
let's
touchdowns
just focus on
too,
scoring touchdowns.
yeah, let's just get some points. We don't really care how we get it. We don't care how we get it.
Could be a fumbled snap from the other team, and someone could pick it up in the end zone, hand it to one of our players, and we just walk it in. I would be fine with that. I don't care how we get them. Just please get them.
Regardless, this is a big game for New England. Not their biggest of the year because that was last week, but still, obviously, if they're going to turn this ship around and have any chance to come back towards the end of the season with playoffs in mind, you need to start winning now because it's not going to get any easier as the weeks come by. So with that, enjoy this weekend's game. Just an update, next week's post-game reaction is going to be delayed. I am going to volunteer at a camp all weekend, and I will have no access to the internet or my phone. So that'll be fun. Hopefully I come back to a Patriots win. If not, might as well not come home, because that'll be
I'll be blowing up your phone with no response.
There we go. Well, regardless, everybody enjoy the game. You can expect the post-game reaction on Tuesday next week instead of Monday, but the week prior we'll be back on track, and regardless, we'll have a preview episode for you next week as well on Thursday. But until next Tuesday, we'll see you then. Enjoy the Pats versus Saints game this Sunday. Good luck to the Patriots. Hopefully it's enjoyable. If not, at least I won't be watching it. We'll see you all next week. What?
I'm smiling so hard at this camera.
Dude, where did record go?
No way.
No, it recorded. It's just like I minimized my screen.
Okay, I see it.